Welcome to WRPB and WRPB Studios. This was a really good day for me, okay? Every interview I did, I had a beautiful woman next to me. Can't get a better job than that, guys. With me is Jade Stanton. I get that right?
That you did.
And you are the BPD coach.
Yes, quite a mouthful. Yes, the BPD coach.
No, it's not a mouthful. When you say what it means, it's more of a mouthful. So what is BPD?
Borderline personality disorder. So yeah, I would agree. That's more of a mouthful. Yes.
Right. Okay, so how long are you around in this industry?
I've been coaching for 6 years now.
Okay.
Working in support with people with borderline personality disorder for more about 12 years, 13.
Okay, so how many people in this country? Because that would be your clientele. Because I think everybody's like that now.
Well, actually, so I work with people outside of the country as well. There's an argument about how many people have borderline personality disorder. It's anywhere from 1% to 2% to 5-6%. So a fairly large number of people.
Okay, why did you get into this?
Because I had borderline personality disorder myself and struggled with mental health for many, many years. And there were very few resources. It was very difficult to find someone who was knowledgeable, despite going to many doctors and therapists and all of these different things. Not a lot of people knew or could guide us through the process. So once I started working my own recovery, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to help guide other people through that process.
So it kind of relates to me in my mind, like, don't take this wrong, but almost every coach in recovery, in the recovery industry, has been through that industry.
Many of them, yeah. I think with coaching, many times you're trying to pass on, what you've learned from your standpoint or what you've gone through, and I think it does add a level of camaraderie, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and I get it, because
yeah.
I was sexually abused as a kid, and I don't really coach, but I'm on a crisis line.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
I have a good friend, and she was an addict for years, been clean for almost 10 years, and she works in a facility helping others.
Yes.
My philosophy I had a cousin whose son was molested, and he flew down, my cousin flew down, was talking to me about it because he knows I went through it. And he said, well, I spent $30,000 on this doctor and $20,000. I says, unless you go through it, you really don't know. You could take whatever you learned in school and you can throw it out, because everybody's situation is a little bit of a snowflake.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and you got to figure out what points that snowflake has before you can really decipher how you want to help them.
Yeah.
So you get into this industry years ago, and now it's years gone by. Let's call it recovery for a thing. Do you still have to fight it for yourself? Is it still a thing that you deal with every day?
Yeah. So what I tell people is recovery is a lifestyle. It's like fitness. You can't just work out for a year and then you're fit for the rest of your life. It's something that you have to do every day. You have to work at every day, and it gets easier when it is a lifestyle. I don't have to put in the kind of effort I did in the beginning to work on my recovery. But it's still something that you work on every day and you live every day. Yeah.
And I don't know that that's an issue I have, but if you have a terrible day, does it kick in and you think about not going back to drugs or alcohol, but going back to that disorder again?
Sometimes, yeah. I think it depends on kind of how much stress you're under. If you're under a lot of stress, look, the thoughts and the feelings and things like that will probably never go away for people who are emotionally sensitive or who struggle with things, but it's how you respond to it is how I view it. So I could have a bad day and my thoughts might go somewhere I don't want them to go, or they, back into old patterns. But for recovery, for me, it means, catching that early and turning that around before it becomes a problem, before it becomes an issue or interferes in my life in some way. So it's almost like catching something within the first few seconds before it turns into a problem, I guess. It's not that you never have the thoughts or you never have difficult emotions, but more that you have the tools to know what to do with them when they come up.
It's interesting because for me, it's like, when I speak in front of a group, I see the tears that come out, and someone always comes over to me and says, hey, my uncle molested me when I was 6. How do you do it? How can you talk about it?
Right.
And I know that probably even in your scenario, if you don't talk about it, you're never going to heal.
That was very true for me, and having it, the first opening to recovery for me was finding other people that understood what it was like, because really, unless you go through it, it's very difficult for you to comprehend, what someone's talking about when they talk about a feeling or a thought or an experience. And having other people that know what that's like goes a really long way in the healing process. I think it's key.
Who's your clientele? No names, please.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Other people with borderline mainly. I work with people who do not have borderline personality disorder. I work with families sometimes. I'll work with teenagers sometimes. But mainly the people that I'm working with are people who either have borderline or suspect they have borderline, have been through a lot of different treatments, a lot of doctors, a lot of therapists, and are looking for somebody to kind of help hold them accountable and help them figure out which treatment resources they need to be utilizing the most.
Okay, I have to go backwards for a second. What is borderline personality disorder?
So borderline personality disorder is primarily an emotional regulation disorder. So people with BPD have a very difficult time regulating emotions. They tend to come on quickly. They tend to last longer. And they tend to have more difficulties in relationships as well, with self-identity, all because of this emotion dysregulation. A lot of them also, many have a trauma history. So there's a lot of things that kind of go into it. It's a bit of a complicated diagnosis and takes a lot of experience to determine whether someone has BPD or not. But mainly it's about the emotional.
And that's why if you're looking for help, you surely want to find someone who's been through it, because they know what you've been through. Now, I mean, I know that whole scenario about adult sexual abuse survivors, because I am one, and I know the path that it could have taken. In our, for lack of a better word, experiences, you either become gay, lesbian, alcoholic, drug addict, an abuser yourself, very promiscuous, very cold, or you commit suicide. Those are 8 pieces of what happens when you're sexually abused as a kid. I was blessed in the fact that I don't drink. I never even tried smoking pot, no drugs my whole life. Some of the other issues, and I only really had one issue, which was I took the promiscuous route, okay? And that was almost like an addiction.
Yeah.
So I have to think about that, not as much anymore, but basically every day. Did people look at you different prior to you being in this recovery scenario?
Yes, very much.
Family?
So. Everyone, yes. Family, friends, everyone, yes.
Okay, so when you say, obviously you're relating it to emotion, does it bring on violent emotion?
It can get to that level where people struggle to control impulsive behavior. But one thing that a lot of us kind of push in the community is that it doesn't equate abuse, right? So just because you have a mental health disorder doesn't mean that you're going to be abusive or violent. But yeah, some people who struggle with BPD do get abusive and do get violent, and that can definitely be a struggle. Or like you said, go into drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, things like that are, coping, a way of coping that they don't help in the long run, but.
Well, people always say that if you go through something, especially like addiction, what happens is you exchange one for another.
Yes.
Hopefully the one you exchange is better than the one you than the one you had. But as I look back and all the people, I mean, I've done 70,000 interviews, and a lot of people in the industry, kind of that, not that you're in, but the kind of coaching industry.
Yes.
And it's interesting because you don't have to, but you deal with people who've had issues like you, and you look at them and you say, that was me, right? I mean, is that what happens?
Yeah, I think I learn from everybody that I work with. I always see kind of a little piece of something that I've struggled with, or a way that I used to be, or even something that I'm still struggling with. And it's a connection, I think it connects us as, we're not alone in the struggle. We can definitely comprehend, what some of those things are.
Okay, so I'm going to just guess that prior to you getting into your recovery, you went through some tough crazy times.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay,
It was a wild ride.
Okay. And you and everybody else, we've all have backstories. Okay. Some people talk about them, some don't. You know, I do a podcast which talks about going from the dark to the light. And I don't know that we're ever perfect.
Right.
Okay. I don't know, even my situation happened, I was 11.
Right.
Okay, I'm way older than that now. I still, every so often, struggle with those memories. And I think part of the problem for me is that it wasn't my, for lack of a better word, addiction. It was his addiction, my uncle's. Okay? And I have to deal with, when I came out with it, my mom spoke to him still and stuff like that. Did you get family support once you decided to do recovery?
I did. Yes, I was fortunate in that regard. There's many people that do not have that family support. I definitely had a very supportive family. They did everything they possibly could to get the resources that I needed, and you know, they struggled as well. I did not make the process easy on them
I'm sure.
by any means. But yeah, they were very supportive. There were definitely people in my life that were not supportive, or you know, just kind of, even when I was still very sick, wanted to pull away, and that's understandable. But yeah, once I started recovery, I did have quite a bit of support. I think it took some people time to come around to the idea that I was actually in recovery, and
that something was wrong.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't believe BPD. Yeah, whatever. It doesn't really exist. You know, I had it different. I was like, why'd you wait so long? And of course, I had it never happened. Okay, and it's a scenario that we have to live with, and we have to push through that it did happen, and yours too.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, it's funny because my uncle, I was very close with him. He would always go, "Oh, you know, Wayne, he's a liar growing up." Well, you know what? He doesn't really, he's a liar. And then I didn't realize till I came out with it, and everybody asked him, "Oh, you know, Wayne, he's a liar." He was just prepping me. Do you have other family members that have BPD?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you coach them?
No, so
Or
that's
they passed it?
yeah. Well, they have their own recovery support, so that's, you know, we kind of have some boundaries there. But yeah, they're in recovery as well.
And I think you need that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think, I could be wrong, but I think you need to separate you from them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But I still think that you're part of the same community.
Yes.
Okay. So so there's AA, there's NA, there's SA, is there a community for BPD?
No, and that's been something we've kind of been floating around, you know, an idea like that. There are some BPD communities and support communities, and especially online, but nothing solid like an AA program or a 12-step program or anything like that. So,
Do you think those are required or needed?
I think they're helpful. I think they're very helpful. Many people in BPD recovery, for example, also are part of a 12-step group or a codependency group, or an ACA group or something like that, where they're getting additional tools. So yeah, I think a lot of those things can help.
How did you finally find out that you have BPD?
I was diagnosed by a specialist when I was young. Most people don't get diagnosed till they're over 18. I was diagnosed at 16, actually, by a specialist here in town, and he identified some things very early on that most doctors don't usually identify that early, which was very helpful, I think, in the long run for identifying what treatment.
So you're a parent of a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and you feel something's not right? What are some of the signs?
Many people, but not all, struggle with things like self-injury, suicidal thoughts, emotion dysregulation in general, which I know kind of sounds like maybe a lot of teenagers may struggle with emotion dysregulation, but it's really on another level. Difficulties with self-identity, depersonalization, sometimes dissociation, things like that can be part of the struggle. But I think the main thing is emotional outbursts, really impulsive behavior, self-destructive behavior, things like that can be some of the red flags.
I have impulsive behavior, but I don't have self-destructive behavior.
We all do to a certain extent.
Well, maybe I do have, I own a business, a brick and mortar. Maybe I do have self-destructive Okay. I became an entrepreneur. That's self-destructive behavior right there alone.
Yeah, they sound very, like general terms, and that's why it takes a real true specialist to be able to identify what's borderline personality disorder and what's not, because the symptoms themselves, can sound like a lot of the things that we deal with all put together.
Right.
They make a pattern that starts to stick out. Yeah.
Is there an age that it really starts to come out?
Usually around puberty, you'll start to see signs. Some people
Oh, so
will
for guys
say-
like in the 50s.
Even the guys are going to hit it in their early teens and
Okay.
things like that. A lot of people, though, will say they knew they were sensitive or they knew something was different even before that.
When they're willing to come out and talk about it.
Yes.
Otherwise,
yes.
they'll make
Which
excuses.
many are not, yeah.
Right, and rationalize, make excuses,
Yes.
and blame others.
Yes, yeah.
I know this is kind of weird, off-the-mark question. It seems to me that if you have BPD, it's going to lead you to be narcissistic.
So the great question, actually. This is a big conversation as well in the BPD community, because there is a big difference between borderline and narcissism, narcissistic personality disorder, but they can look similar. So there's a lot of people who will say someone with borderline is narcissistic. The mechanisms behind that are a little bit different. So people with BPD are actually, they have a lot of shame, a lot of times, a lot of guilt, a lot of
Narcissists don't have any of that.
right, self-consciousness. Right. So there's that's one of the big key differences. A lot of, we feel terror if we do something that hurts someone. We feel awful. Those types of things really kind of can distinguish it a bit. It's more technical than that. But yeah, it can come off to other people as narcissistic as well. People can sometimes think that borderlines are manipulative or attention seeking sometimes, and I'm sure we can be, but that's
I should
not
really
really.
need to stop talking to you because you keep saying these things. I'm starting to think that I'm falling into this category somewhere. It's kind of scaring me.
Yeah, well, I should say don't self-diagnose. Be very careful. Yes, yeah. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these things are things that a lot of people struggle with in general. For borderline, it's to this very intense level that a lot of things have not been able to help or treat until more recently.
Okay, we're not kind of running out of time. We're kind of running out of time, but this is important, in my opinion. How do people get in touch with you?
Best way is through my website or on social media. I'm
Which is?
constantly sharing things.
What's your
Jade
website?
Mental Health Coach is my social media handle, and then jadestanton.com is my website. Best way to reach out, schedule a call, get in touch, email, really any way. But usually people get in touch through my website or social media, and just to ask some questions or get some resources.
Everybody, I say it a million times, and this really stands stronger. Use a professional. You said something, don't self-diagnose.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times in this world you can't fix yourself, okay? And it doesn't, the words "takes a village" stands pretty high in the world because it does take a village for people to get from point A to point B. It's almost impossible to get from point A to point B by yourself, whether it be surviving sexual abuse as a kid, drug addict, alcoholic, BPD. Look for assistance. There's no shame in that, okay? None. And as we move forward in this world, things get tougher and tougher, okay? And that little bit of help is really a lot of help, more than you really realize. Jade, thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Everybody, use a professional. We'll be right back.